Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mental Health Mallee podcast. Today, we're very grateful to have Rabel Marqus joining us. How you going, Rabel?
Going well. Thanks for having me.
You've got quite a remarkable story. Would you like to tell us a bit about you and your background and story?
I was born and raised um, in Iraq. So I'm an Assyrian, not Syrian. So Assyrians are essentially the indigenous people of Iraq, and parts of Turkey, Syria, and Iran. So what previously used to be the Assyrian Empire, which was the world's first empire. So the descendants of that, which are now currently a minority population in that area and globally. Born and raised in Iraq, studied water resource engineering, graduated, and then left the country in 2017, and then arrived to Australia in 2019. And in that gap, the 2-year gap there, I was living as a refugee in Jordan. But finally made my way to Australia in 2019, settled with my family down in Melbourne, and then found a job here in Mildura that really excited me, that I wanted to be a part of. And so I decided to make the move on my own, and come up to Mildura to take on the role.
Can you share a little bit more about, I guess, how your journey to the Northern Mallee region has shaped your perspective on mental well-being?
I think the move for me personally, because it was essentially the first time that I've separated from my family, essentially, because we grew up, in a tight knit household, and we then left the country together. We lived as refugees together, and then settled here in Australia together as well. But then making the move, it was more of an individual move, and I separated, did my own thing, moved up here. I think the way that it's reshaped my view on mental well-being is essentially discovering the challenges of living on your own. As you know, one of the, I guess, more important aspects of mental well-being is to have a good support system. Generally, where we come from, it's a family. It could be, you could argue that a community of friends can be that as well. But for me personally, it's always been my family. So um, just the simple aspects of life, dealing with those as an individual rather than having that support of a family, has been a challenge. But fortunately for me, the close and the strong relationship that I have with my family, I always keep in touch, even if I'm not seeing them as often as I would like. But I feel like that's a good support system to have. But it paints a picture of how important that support system is when you actually are separated from it.
You can hear some of your personal strengths coming through as you're sharing your values of family and connection. What would you say those strengths are if you were to share with listeners?
Just the way that my life has gone thus far. One of those sort of key strengths that I've developed has been resilience, and adaptability. So, I was born in Baghdad, and then we essentially migrated from Baghdad to Erbil, where I studied, and then from there, obviously, then later on as an adult, leave the country, go to Jordan. So it's never been sort of very like the normal, stable type life. So it always had that I guess when you're not faced with any choice but to adapt, you do develop that adaptability. So that's served me well continuously throughout my life. And same thing with resilience. I was listening to someone talk about how it's not the journey nor the destination; it's who you become on the journey. So that, I think that builds resilience. It builds character, having those distances traveled, those kilometers traveled across the way. It builds experiences, which is essentially what makes you who you are as a human being. And that's, I find a lot of fulfillment in that as well.
Excellent. I love how you've shared that perspective of distances traveled in terms of how our experiences shape us, especially going through challenging times. For someone who's listening along at home right now that's in a position where perhaps they are going through some big life changes and they are on that road at the moment, how would they go about being more adaptable?
The more courageous you are, the more you step up to take on a challenge, the more I think you'll have that grow in you naturally, that resilience or that adaptability or that strength. The if you use the example of gym, if you go to the gym, the weight that's on the bar doesn't change. It's your back getting stronger. So it's life's challenges are the same. It's you growing in facing them. But you don't really do that by shying away from a challenge or from a crisis or from a problem in your life. You've got to be able to face it. You've got to be able to face it head on. And once you take that step, there's a certain power that develops in you, but you don't understand it until you actually take that step. So I think my advice would be, and this is, you take it with a grain of salt. I'm only 30 years old. I haven't got too much life experience, but it's take that first step. A phrase that's repeated continuously in the Bible is do not be afraid. And it's repeated 365 times, by the way, which is, if you apply that one day per year, just don't be afraid, be courageous, take that first step, and then the rest will follow. You just take that first step and you do your best with what you can see. You can't see the whole journey and what it's going to result into, but you can see that there's a little bit of light in there. Yes, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of wolves or whatever you're seeing, but you take that first step with a bit of confidence and you back yourself and you do your best. It won't be easy, but it's less risky than staying in the situation that you're in.
Reminds me of Suzanne Jeffers, who talks about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And there'll always be fear so long as we continue to grow, which I love how you've linked that in and kind of segues more into, I guess, your leadership journey as well. You did a program called the Northern Mallee Leaders Program back in 2023. And we learned a little bit about Brené Brown and how vulnerability is actually courage. What are some examples in your personal life where you've demonstrated that vulnerability as courage?
Look, I think I may not do the best job of expressing it in I think the most um, mainstream type of way. Like, I'm an emotional person. I'm a very emotional person, but at the same time, um, I may not be too visible with it in some ways. I try to be stoic as much as I can, but I think there's experiences in my life where I've just through being myself has maybe shown that vulnerability. One of the bigger life shaping experiences for me was losing my father, and I think going back to the actual day of losing my father, I didn't really have that level of, I guess, emotion being displayed as far as, someone, you're devastated, you're crushed, but at the same time, I think naturally I discovered a lot about myself in that experience, was that I was calm. And there's, I think there's strength in being that and being authentic. If you're more naturally inclined to be calm in that situation, and then so be it. And in some ways, it helps the people around you because they see you as, oh yeah, I've always known Rebel to be like that. And that's sometimes that's what people look for in a time of crisis. It could be that they look for someone who's actually still being themselves. They haven't broken from what their authentic self is. Um, but at the same time, not holding anything back, um, and being yourself and being in that moment. And if it calls for you to be strong, then you be strong. If it calls for you to be to show more vulnerability, then so be
You
it.
can hear that, I guess, the power of authenticity, like showing up as ourselves, not so much feeling we need to be anyone else other than that from moment to moment. And you've talked a little bit about your grief journey, and like we've had conversations about this on our walks and over coffee, how everyone grieves differently. So one person may be experiencing different emotions, anger, sadness, or even as you mentioned, like for you, being calm was authentic to you. And by being that, you're able to support other people too. Being that calm presence in your family and with your friends, like when you did lose your father, how did you support those around you?
For me personally, it was more so about being present, um, showing up for my family, showing up for myself first and foremost. So first and foremost, you've got to think of showing up for yourself. For me, there's a lot of things that I did at that time that didn't deviate from my normal life or my normal routine. You know, I was back in the gym 3 days after my dad's passing. I was back into a bit of a routine. I was back to seeing my friends. Doing what I would do. Another way of looking at how to approach losing a loved one is, if you truly appreciate that person and what they've done for you, especially a parent, um, you would strive to then make the most out of your life to honor them. Um, yes, granted, it's not easy to do very quickly, um, but if you have that in your mind as a matter of, no, if that person did so much for me, I've got to now show up and be the best version of myself to honor their legacy. And that essentially drives you personally, and then it drives the people around you. Because a lot of times, and you talk about leadership a lot, but a lot of times leadership is just being yourself and doing your best, and then people around you actually see that and they do their best as well. It's leading by example. Sometimes you don't have to do more than just doing your best, really, and letting other people see that's, oh yeah, that's possible.
There's the element of there's the grief that we've experienced, and you and I have had plenty of conversations about this as well, having both gone on grief journeys. Be present to that emotion, but also think about what would that person actually want for me. They want me to show up as my best. They want me to keep taking care of myself. And like I remember my grandparents growing up would always say, be happy, be healthy, be strong. So there was the aspect of grief, but there was also that aspect of, okay, so yes, I do need to keep taking care of myself and eating good and sleeping well and going to gym, because if they were here right now, they'd be like, nope, come on, we want what's best for you.
That's such good wisdom too, by the way. Be happy, be healthy, be strong, because that's the three things that money can't buy, really. Yes, money can probably bring you a level of opportunity to be happy, but if that was the case, then all the developed countries would be happier than the ones that, the third world countries. But then, I've been in Australia for about 5 or 6 years now, and the the levels of mental health issues in this country compared to where I came from, third world country, war torn. There's not a decade where there hasn't been a war, a proper war, um, and people don't really have nearly as much mental health issues. We spoke about it the other day. Like, it'll be something to probably to probably do a thesis on, and just go and see why is it that these really poor people are actually probably in a happier place spiritually um, than where a lot of us are here in a really good country where there's an abundance of things available to you. I think it was Jimmy Carr um, on he was on an interview with someone, and this clip popped up on my Instagram. He was saying happiness equals quality of life minus envy. You may think you're having the best day. You've done everything that you wanted to do that day. You've done whatever your well-being routine is. And you sit down and you open your phone and you scroll through Instagram and you see someone, same age as you are, and they're living this lavish lifestyle somewhere, on a yacht or something, and you go, you know what, I'm not having a good day anymore. But it's because of that. It's because of that. It enhances that envy aspect where if you didn't have access to it, you wouldn't know really, and you'd more so focus on your own quality of life. And I think that's one of the challenges that we all face daily. And that's where you probably need to be more mindful of what you consume. Even if you're not producing a lot in your life, you may not be where you want to be. You may not have reached the financial level that you want yet. You may not have created the family that you want yet, whatever your goals are. But maybe the thing that you can control the most is what you consume, because a lot of times that's really what gets in the way of your own happiness.
It's so interesting that even the comparison, like I heard a quote that the only person you should be comparing yourself to is the person you were yesterday. And I love that we have dove straight into the science of happiness, which is my background in positive psychology. And Dr. Martin Seligman talks about the science of happiness and the science of human flourishing. And a lot of what you've shared is in that hedonic well-being space, which is living a life of pleasure, which is that instant gratification. It's money, it's our lifestyles, it's jumping on social media. But they say in order to be truly happy, there needs to be a balance of what they call eudaimonic well-being. It's like living a life of meaning and purpose. So, seeing as we've ventured into the space of happiness, what would you say gives your life meaning and purpose?
I think I discovered this again when my dad passed away. Before that, I think I lived life more of maybe more so on autopilot. Not in a bad way or anything like that, but I didn't see beyond myself until then. It was all about what I was doing, what I was studying, what I needed to do for myself. Going through that experience, I think I realized that a lot of what gave me a purpose was my own family, and it was my father's family essentially, and it was to carry on that legacy. It can be in me supporting my family to get to where they want to be, but it also could be in a way me showing up with my best to achieve as much as I can in my life. You never lose sight of why you're on this journey of whatever you're trying to make, as far as with your job or with your business or whatever it may be. What is the reason that you're doing that? You don't lose sight of that, because a lot of times what happens is, and we see this a lot with a lot of people, is they get more addicted to that process than to the actual results of what that could achieve for them. You see a lot of workaholics. You see a lot of people that just never think that they're enough. I'm not enough because I'm not making this amount. I'm not enough because so-and-so is making more than I am. Whereas if you tie yourself to what you actually started with, you'll always be enough, because you're on that journey to get to there. So in your mind, you're always doing your best, and that should be enough for you. It doesn't matter what anyone else is making. It doesn't matter what you would have wanted to be making, as long as it doesn't destroy your own character, doesn't destroy your own view of yourself.
I have a friend that always says, "You are enough and you are worthy because you exist." It's that simple. But we tend to overcomplicate things. We tend to tie our self-worth and our feeling of being enough to external things that are outside of ourselves. But we need to remember that self-worth and that feeling of enoughness comes from within.
Absolutely. And a lot of those things too, by the way, they've been put in front of us by the outside world, really. There's some things that we didn't value as in our core. We didn't value those things. But because society tells you to value them, you start to put them on a pedestal and you start to think, yes, I need to be doing that. I need to be driving this type of car. I need to be wearing this type of watch. I need to be, wearing this type of brand, where that's not really from your core. That's an external thing. And that's you being affected by things that you shouldn't be affected by. But it's brought onto you by the society that you're around.
When we do values in the leadership program, and I've taken participants through that, what are your personal values? People often sit back and go, I don't actually know. Like, are my values work? Is it, because we're so shaped by our environments, which is fascinating, but it's stripping it back. What are your values? Like, what's most important to you? And you've touched on this through our conversation, like family is a big one for you. Having done the leadership program as well, how has this influenced your perspective on community well-being?
You become less less judgmental in some ways. Obviously, you still have your standards that you want the people in your circle to meet, but then also it gives you a lot of patience when you're dealing with people where you think, yeah, they're going through something that I have no idea about. Similarly, when you're talking to someone, for example, and you're having a discussion, you're having a debate, whatever it may be, it gave me that perspective of this person might know something that I don't. So, or chances are I may be wrong. It gives you a whole new, different level to aspire to, where you realize you don't know everything. There's a lot that a lot of other people know more than you do about. So it keeps you humble in some ways. Northern male leaders, in another way, I think going through towns like Oyen, for example, you discover a lot about how community resilience helps build so much from nothing, like from essentially nothing. We went to the lake, we went to the gym that the community had built there, which was super impressive. And by the way, I still follow them. Like, I still see what they do on Instagram and stuff. And there's always people there. They run classes. They do all sorts of different things. And to think that this came from just people in the community saying, we need to build this. We need this for us. And they go out, they raise the money, and they build it.
I love the story of Oyen as well, how you really do see the power of community and people banding together. And there's something like millions of dollars of in-kind services went into creating this lake.
Wow.
I think don't quote me on this, it's something like $4 million. They've got people in the community who were like, yes, we want to make this happen. And part of it was advocating to government to get the grants, but then the other part is people actually just putting in the work themselves. Now, Rabel, having built a new life in the Northern Mallee region and in Australia, what is some advice you could give to someone who's looking to do the same?
There's things that the Northern Mallee region specifically offers in comparison to where I come from, for example, from Melbourne, from City, is that lifestyle. That's, we're talking about mental health, and really, in a lot of ways, it's a much healthier place to be living in. I say this all the time when I speak to my friends and even people from work. just the difference of no traffic. Big deal. Like, a lot of people don't think about it, but you sit in your car for 2 hours a day going to and back from work when you're living in these crowded areas. If you think of those 2 hours, those could be your 2 hours of well-being practice. Those could be your gym session. It could be your walk. It could be your time with a friend. All those things that impact your mental well-being and your physical well-being as well, compared to sitting in a car raging in traffic. So there's advantages that it does provide to you, but it's got to be for something more than just, oh yeah, I'm going to give this a go. There's got to be some reasons. It's got to be in alignment with what you're trying to achieve in your life. For me, it was my work that led me here. Prior to coming to Mildura, prior to coming to the northern Mallee region, I didn't know of its existence. I had just arrived to Australia, to Melbourne, which, coming from outside of Australia, Melbourne, Sydney, you might know Brisbane, and that's about it. So I came here for the work that I was doing. And, I had, going back to my background, I had studied water resources engineering, and I wanted to work as an engineer in Australia. And Mildura provided me that opportunity through Lower Murray Water. And so that was the main reason that got me here. The rest was a bonus, really. And it was a great bonus in some ways. You look outside your window and there's the river. It's a 2-minute walk. You get to the river, which is a luxury, really. A lot of people don't have that. If you're in a crowded city, you could be an hour away from the nearest beach or whatever that may be, or from a nearest hike, or being in nature. There's a lot that happens in nature that we've come to lose our appreciation for. But I think it's slowly coming back. Like, people are realizing the importance of being in nature. So there's a lot of value of being in a more regional area in that way as well, because you can easily be in nature within a 5-minute drive. So there's those luxuries that I think are making a bit of a comeback now. I speak to friends from urban areas, and they're usually long for something like that, something where they're in a quiet place where they can shut down the hustle and bustle of the urban city life. One way that I found out about this as well, I'll give you a story. It was when I first started my work at Lower Murray Water, and I had full confidence that this is what I was meant to be doing. It felt right for me, but anyway, it was probably a month or so into starting, maybe less than a month, and I just sort of finished my training, and I had to go out on site. Now, when I was a kid, I looked up to my father. Like, he was my hero from the start. And I used to always hear stories. Like, my aunt would tell me stories about he used to work many hours away on site, and then he'd come back every weekend or something. He'd come back home in his Pajero, Mitsubishi Pajero, the car. And that always stuck with me. It was a gray Pajero. I've never seen it, but that's how it was described to me. Anyway, fast forward, I arrive to Mildura, start work with Lower Murray Water, a couple of weeks in, 3 weeks in, however long it was. Okay, now you've been trained, you can run your own show, and I get called on site. So I booked a car without knowing what car it was, grab the keys, go to the car, lo and behold, it's a Pajero Mitsubishi. And that, I've been, in some ways, there's signs where you can tell, oh yeah, there's someone pushing you towards this. There's someone who's watching over you in a way, and they're saying, this is where you're meant to be. Like, you're on the right path. Keep going. So that what drove me more than anything else, really, with coming over here.
Amazing. I love that because sometimes we can go, "Oh, is that a coincidence?" But it's like, "No, I think I'm on path." That's pretty clear.
There's got to be something. I think if you're wise enough, you've got to admit to yourself that there's more to it than what you know, and and really, why would you choose not to believe in that? Why would you choose to brush that off? Most things in life, most decisions that you make are based on faith. If you're going to sit around and wait for all the evidence to show up, they won't. You'll have some evidence, you'll have some facts, and then you've got to make a decision. And you make that decision based on, yes, a certain percentage of facts and evidence and what feels right, etc. But then some of it is also having faith. An example of it is relationships. You could meet someone once, twice, 3 times, 10 times, and you make a decision. Yeah, I'm gonna pursue this long term, or pursue a marriage with this person. Say, how do you do that, really? Because you don't really have all the evidence. You don't have. You can't fast forward in your life and see what challenges you're going to go through and how they'll react and how you'll be, etc., etc. You can't do that. You live your life as you go, but you find enough evidence, not all the evidence. You find enough evidence where you say, oh yeah, this person, they know how to treat people, for example. They respect others. They respect me. They respect my family. They're emotionally available, whatever it is that you're looking for. Those are enough evidence, 3, 5, 6 non-negotiables that you tick. And then you go, okay, the rest of it, I'm going to take a leap of faith. And it's like that with every big decision that you make. It's never just fully evidence-based. A lot of it is faith-based. So back to the point of believing in God or believing in a higher power. Why not do that? Why not have that faith of, yeah, if I take a big, massive step, I'm not on my own. There's a power that's supporting me where I'll be okay.
Absolutely. That's so powerful. And it does touch on another point of what makes good mental well-being. It is having that faith and that spirituality. There's studies shown that contribute to great mental well-being and longer life as well, and more fulfilled life. And then the other side to it as well is having positive relationships. Like, what's that foundation that you're building this relationship off? Because when those core things are in place, you go, okay, well, this is something that we can build, we can work on, we can develop, knowing what those non-negotiables are, which is a totally different podcast. We'll have to get you back in. Um, so Rabel, what are some daily habits or routines that support your mental well-being?
Um, I think a big one for me is, and I've probably developed this over the past 4 or 5 years, is eating healthy. That's a big one for me. I've always done it since I was 18 or something. I started eating healthy, eating clean, but it wasn't healthy per se. It was more like bodybuilding type healthy, which is not very healthy. It's very limiting. You can only eat so much boiled rice and chicken, and it's not really super healthy for you. But then fast forward when we were in Jordan, on weekends, my brother and I, my younger brother, Ramel, he got into cooking, and he's really good at it. And he taught me some of the basics of how to cook. And so from then to now, I just find recipes online that use, whole foods, still keeping it healthy, but good as well. And I think that really helps me a lot. So that's always part of my routine. Every day I cook, fresh, sort of, go do my groceries, go do whatever for that, for whatever I'm trying to make. And that always puts me in a good mood. The cooking, the process itself, and the actual eating. and it feels good too, obviously, because you're eating nourishing food. I think that's one of them. Number two is, and this is again something I've developed very early on, is being active. So that may take different forms. For me, for the most part, it's been going to the gym. That's been consistent. Try to go 4 or 5 days a week. But even on my days off, I always go out for a walk. Always go out of my way to do something active where I'm not just sitting there. Especially when I've got too much on my mind. With work, with life in general, you need to go out there, get some fresh air, get some steps in. I think that always helps. I think those two are pretty big. The third one, which is probably most important, in my view, is connecting with the people that I love, who I care about, who care about me, my circle, essentially. So, even though I live far away from my family, it's, every few days, I'll call one of them and we'll spend an hour on the phone just talking. Could be anything, what's going on with work, what's going on with your work, how are your kids, or if it's with my brother, we're talking, we're talking sports, whatever it may be. That always helps. So I'd say those three key things work most for me, and they're typically part of my routine. They may not be as scheduled as people might think. It's more just a routine, and it's something that I do on a regular basis, basically.
Fantastic. I love that too. It's almost bringing it back to those basics of nature, movement, eating well, and having connection. And if you're living that as part of your, every day, does it really need to be, okay, at 7 p.m. every day, this is what I do? That does work for some people, having a little structure, but it also, with how you've shared that, that's just a way of being for you, and it works.
Absolutely. Look, I'm not the best with planning, which is ironic because I essentially get paid to do planning for work. But outside of work, I don't like to plan. I try to go with the flow as much as possible. So, say as an example, working out, it could be that I work out at 5 a.m. If I happen to wake up at 5 a.m. without setting an alarm, I hate alarms. Or it could be that I work out at 9 p.m. As long as I get it in during the day, whenever feels best for me, right for me, that's when I'll do it. But I'll make sure I do it. That's the big one. It's not just going with the flow and just letting go and just getting lazy, because a lot of times you're trying to sharpen the discipline muscle rather than your physical muscle. It's keeping that consistency ticking. You may not be feeling your best or having the best day, but you still get in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Doesn't have to be a 45-minute, an hour workout. You just get in, tick the box, get some movement in, get some blood flowing, done, you're out. But you've checked that consistency point. You've worked out your discipline and your mental strength, versus maybe your muscle didn't get too much out of it like it would from a perfect day and a perfect workout, but it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. It's that some steps or some movement is better than no movement. And what you're doing is you're showing up and you're building trust with yourself. So, okay, I do show up. Like, I can give myself this flexibility without the structured routine because I know that I will show up.
That's you've hit it, like you've hit the nail on the head. Like that's what builds people. Say, like, if I liken it to going to the gym as an example, there's so many people who go to the gym who struggle a lot with their image, self-image, with how they view themselves, insecurities, emotional issues, etc., etc. But when you see them, you think, oh yeah, this person looks like, they look fit, they look strong, they must be strong, But some of the most fragile people go to the gym, and if you go to the gym enough, you'll find out that that's the truth. The difference is the people who go to the gym for the sake of appearing a certain way are, in my opinion, missing the value of going to the gym. the value of going to the gym is you proving to yourself that you're going to stay on track with your goal. So you're fulfilling the promise that you've made for yourself. And the carryover that has to your daily life is massive. It's much bigger than any muscle you can build. It's much bigger than any powerlifting record you might hit for yourself. It's much more powerful than anything like that. It's intangible, but it shows in every aspect of your life because you carry that confidence, that self-esteem of, yeah, I keep my word to myself. That's massive.
I had a mentor that once shared, how you do anything's how you do everything. So you showing up to go to gym for yourself, not because of an image, not because of avoidance. I think there is a level sometimes in life where we do things to avoid facing ourselves and doing the work on ourselves, and it can be an external thing. But for you, it seems like it's you're being in integrity with who you are, your word, your values.
That's a good way of putting it. I'll use that.
So, Rabel, we've had such a great time getting to hear more about your story, more about the daily practices you do, and sharing with our listeners some valuable insights on mental well-being and navigating life's challenges. What would be one message of hope and encouragement that you could share with our listeners to help them with building their mental well-being, their resilience, and perhaps navigating some setbacks?
Be courageous. Show up to the challenge that is staring at you. I think we, for the most part, are aware of what the first step needs to be. We may not know of the entire pathway ahead, but for the most part, we know what that first step needs to be. If I'm a smoker, I know the first step is to quit smoking. If I'm an alcoholic, I know the first step is to stop drinking, and so on and so forth. If I'm struggling to take that next step in my life where I know I need to walk away from something, for example, I know I need to walk away from something, whether that's an abusive relationship, whether that's a job that I'm not fully myself in. We know what that first step is, but there's always something that's in the way, and that something is fear. And it's fear of the unknown, it's fear of failure, it's fear of whatever it may be, but there is that fear staring at you. But I think you take that first step with courage, and then something builds within you that didn't exist prior. Whether that's character, whether that's resilience, whatever you want to call it, strength, it only happens with that first step. But you've got to be courageous to take that step.
Fantastic. I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. that said, you don't need to see the whole staircase, just take the first step.
Wow. There you go.
Profound. Thank you so much for jumping on the Mental Health Mallee podcast today, Rabel. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hope you enjoyed today's conversation on the Mental Health Mallee podcast. Until next time, take care.